think everyone can hear us. So yeah, as said, we are going to talk about how cognitive biases and ranking can foster an ineffective DevOps culture, and we're going to dive straight in because Kenny and myself are kind of known for talking too much sometimes. So we will just dive straight in and honor the 25-minute limit here. So I want to start off with a story about a meeting that I had yesterday, and it really is related to the labeling, let's say. And I was thinking. And when I was thinking about this talk, I really thought, hey, this meeting was very interesting. So I was in this meeting. We were with all equals. It was with a client of mine, and we were just discussing the project and the next steps. So we were all equals, all consultants, clients. We were just all on the same page. And then at the end of the meeting, we were discussing to get some access to a system. And the client said, well, we need your passports of the whole team in order to make this happen. And then, to be fair, there were 4 men and one woman, me. And then at one point, one of the participants said, "Well, Evelyn, can you please make sure that all the copies of the passports will be delivered to the client?" And I was sitting there and I was like, this is an interesting thing that's happening here. And we will dive into that in this talk. And it doesn't just happen there. Kenny, I think you also have some experience there, right?
Yeah, so I come from a different part there. As mentioned in the preview, I call myself architect, and well, probably everyone knows the ivory tower architect. And within architects, when I come in, well, I move between teams and in a team, but usually an architect, for instance, is paid more, which I find ridiculous because for me, it's just another role in a team. But when you put an architect in a team, people start expecting something from you. And this is not only about architects, it's also about the tester role. It's also about all the other roles. And what it then does with the culture is that they start labeling you, same as what's happening with Evelyn just now, is they start labeling you in this specific role. And if you're not careful enough, there's this thing happening called shifting the burden. So they will expect me to take the decision as an architect. So they're also labeling me in that position, and we call that projecting up, right? So they're projecting up me as an architect. And so it's this whole system thing that's going on there. And this way people start actually not thinking, and I mentioned the word thinking, I know everything. Well, I Google most of my work just the same as you probably do. So, but that's going on there in that team. So even though you might think DevOps culture, we're all equal, we're all amongst equals in the team, that's not entirely true, unfortunately. And we need to start being aware of that because we need to be able to identify all the parts in the system and allow them to speak. All the parts in the group, even those we do not like or believe to be useless, must be present and supported. And this is what we see is not happening enough in these teams. Because weird ideas, for instance, are being smashed down as being weird, right? Not listened to. But even me coming in with experience and me as an architect, might be that people not start speaking up because they think, well, I'll be saying something stupid here, right? So that's what we need to do. So me, as what I try to do is I mentioned about deep democracy, and we'll go into that later, but I'll do some visual and collaborative modeling to create that shared understanding and make information explicit, trying to make everything explicit. The problem though is there's a few questions when we do this, when we're in that team or we're in that organization and we try to do this visual and collaborative modeling, or even just try to be amongst equals. And that's a few things when we're trying to ensure all parts of the system. And that's one, how to make sure everyone said that what has to be said. How can we create and include new insights, and who makes decisions how to get everyone on board with the decision. This is the thing when we start thinking about equality, right? And I think people hear an echo, so I try to lower my voice down to see if there's no feedback anymore. But this is what we're going to talk about. And let's start a bit with how to make sure everyone said what has to be said. And that's what Evelyn goes into. And that's what we start, well, labeling, ranking. Yeah, go ahead, Evelyn.
Yeah, so that's exactly what you said, right? I mean, we can be in any meeting that we like, but there is a difference in ranking. I mean, we are not equals in most meetings, and especially within the collaborative modeling sessions, this comes to the surface pretty much. So ranking is a phenomenon that we all have experience with. Sometimes it's very conscious, and sometimes it's not that conscious. And how we perceive it, if we think it's hindering us or helping us, that really depends on our personal rank in different situations. As I said, it's very much present in the collaborative modeling sessions, because we try to get everyone in that room. Every relevant person and every relevant perspectives will be in that room. So ranking decides, for example, who speaks more, who takes the lead, who expresses an opinion, and who decides not to express an opinion, where you're standing even. It determines a lot in these sessions, and when you are aware of it, you can really learn from that a lot. So we need to make sure that the ranking gets more explicit in the sessions that we are having. So the first very important distinction that we need to understand when it comes to ranking is the difference between explicit ranking and implicit ranking. And explicit ranking, that's pretty clear, right? I mean, your position in the organizational chart, your job title, your level of power, are you a manager or a C-level person or whatever? This is pretty obvious. We all are aware of this explicit ranking thing. But the implicit ranking is also very much affecting everything that we're doing in these sessions. So your gender, your skin color, your perceived level of charisma, the level of informal power you have. So maybe you're not a manager or a C-level person, but you still have quite a lot of power because of your implicit or informal level of power, which is also a form of ranking. And the castle on the top of the slide, so the once upon a time there was a tall white guy and a woman in IT. That's well, it's based on reality, as you can see in this talk. And I am very lucky to do a lot of sessions and talks with Kenny, because he's very aware of his rank. So he's passing on questions to me, sharing his rank with me, and like saying stuff. When questions come up, he's like, well, Evelyn knows more about this, so here's the floor to you. So that really helps. But being aware of this and how it's affecting your sessions is really, really important. So know this difference. So a few examples of ranking in real life. Well, I have a recent one where Kenny and I were doing a domain-driven design workshop somewhere at a client. And literally all the questions just went to Kenny. It was like, Kenny, what do you think about this, this, and this? Even if I just explained something. And that was a real nice example of ranking. And as I said, I'm lucky to do that with Kenny because he was like, you mean what Evelyn said in that session? But we do this unconsciously. And the moment that we are more aware of it, we can tackle it. We can make sure that everyone can say what needs to be said. Because if you're in a session with your boss, for example, it's very likely that you think twice about what you're saying because of that ranking. It needs to be a safe environment. So these are some other examples. And the reason why we are hindered by this ranking thing sometimes has to do with symbolic violence. And symbolic violence is a very, very nice concept that I learned from Romeo. And please watch his talks, and we will share the link if you want to know more about this. But this is basically how we determine our own rank compared to the ranking of others that we are in a room with. So we are all conditioned to have a symbolic ideal of what is dominant and strong and what is dominated and weak. And that's not a judgment, that's just how society is wired. There is this infinite list of traits that you can have, which we yield more power to. And that symbolic ideal changes over time as well. We all have this similar picture, and the more traits that someone has from this list, the more we think this person is in a higher rank than we are at that point. What happened to me, for example, in that meeting with that client that all the questions went to Kenny, I ranked myself lower at some point than Kenny and the other people in the room, because I was like, well, I'm not getting the questions. This person has way more experience than me. So probably I'll be lower in rank. And that's something that you're doing to yourself. That's why it's called symbolic violence. And this is something to be very, very aware of. And if we map that to a familiar situation, for example, pair programming or a mob session, where one of the participants is hitting oneself, then it's not co-creation, it is submission. And with hitting oneself, I mean what I just did in that session as well. You are ranking yourself lower because of everything that's happening in that session, and because you rank yourself lower because you feel that the person has more checks on that infinite list of the symbolic ideal than you do. So you rank yourself lower. And what happens there then, well, imposter syndrome is popping up obviously as well. But this means that you will probably suppress some opinions that you're having. You're not saying stuff because you feel like it's less valuable than what the other person has to say in this pair programming session. Because I'm of lower rank, well, this person will probably know better. He's higher in rank. I'll just shut up and don't say anything. But that can really harm a session, because what we want is we want to include all the wisdom and all the perspectives in such a session. So when you're of a higher rank and it's explicit, you have to make sure that you're sharing that rank. And one thing that you can do to play around a bit with this concept of ranking is the turn it around game. So as you see it in this picture, this the engineer and the male engineer, it feels weird, right? If it would have been the other way around, female engineer and engineer, it would have made more sense, and that's weird. This is also why it's weird when we would read a headline in the newspaper, this big corporate organization has a male CEO. That's also a weird sentence. So this is something that you can do for yourself. If you are in situations, try to turn it around and see if it feels weird. If it feels weird, then there's definitely ranking going on. So Kenny, why could this be a problem from another perspective?
Yeah, so I'm generally mostly of higher ranking in most sessions. So why should I actually care, right? My opinion, I know it all, right? Well, that's not definitely the case. The thing is here, people also look up to making decisions, but just one thing you need to be sure of is that every autocratic decision, every decision I make without the entire group suppresses knowledge and wisdom and creates resistance. Yeah? So that is what you should know. And I use the word suppressing, and what I mean with suppressing is if someone not speaking out here. Yeah? So I think you need to lower your voice a bit, Evelyn, because I hear myself in the feedback. No problem. I saw it later in the chat, so I put on already headphones.
I will.
That works better. So just so you know, every autocratic decision suppresses knowledge and wisdom and creates resistance. Now, what do we need with resistance? We can observe this, right? So there's this sabotage line from Deep Democracy that says it starts with jokes. Get some sarcastic jokes in. Then we get excuses, gossiping. And again, we all do this, by the way. There's no bad doing this. We all do this. It's normal human behavior. But you can observe this in your team. And if you see a lot of sarcastic jokes going on there on the same topic, probably someone is not speaking up. And for me as an architect, usually again in some higher ranking, I know this. And then I try to deal with it. Then I know something is being suppressed here. What can I do about it? Now, one thing, what happened with Evelyn there, right? And I saw it in chat, right? Someone says, well, you're from marketing, right? A nice way to neutralize that is then ask the question, what makes you say that? Which is really interesting, because then it gives that person a way to reflect on themselves and getting to a really awkward situation. So if you could, because I can imagine you get really triggered when someone says that, right, Evelyn, like you do, just try to do that. But me in a higher ranking, I try to share that rank, right? The thing is, for me, people sound insane, but that's only because I probably don't hear the music when they're dancing, right? So think about that. If you think the other person, if you're a higher rank and you see the other person, that's really insane. Think about it. What is there to explore? Think about something you see and you say, what don't I know, right? I don't have all the information yet. So do that. So the thing is, own, play, and share your rank. That's what you want to do. Pass it around. Ask that question. If Evelyn cannot ask the question, what makes you say that? I can ask the question for her. Or vice versa, right? Happens as well. We need to be together in this as well. And for me as a higher person, this really helps me because, again, a higher ranking is just perceived ranking. It doesn't make me better or have more wisdom, especially when I'm not in a team. I'm not there with the information. So I don't know everything and I don't want to make decisions for the team. So open play and share that rank. Go into a room and just say, we need to take a decision and we're not leaving until we make that decision. I'm not making it, but we are making this. That's a way as a architect outside the team, you can handle this and then just have to talk. Right? So that's a bit about ranking. And well, there's another thing going on there, and that's how can we create and include these new insights, right? There's something here that's called cognitive bias that ranking, that Evelyn goes in.
Yeah, I could talk about that for a whole day, but I'm not going to do that, also given the time. But cognitive bias is everywhere, and especially when we're doing collaborative modeling sessions, basically in every meeting. And we are using these cognitive biases to make decisions. And sometimes, well, in most cases, these heuristics or these biases that we're using are really helpful because they allow us to make very easy, quick decisions that help us. But in some cases, we need to counter them and we need to overcome them in order, because they are hindering what we're doing. So in some cases, it's really helpful to try and counter these cognitive biases. And I want to highlight one example that we very often see in these collaborative modeling sessions, and that's functional fixedness. And it's all about getting stuck in what you know. So we have this mental block against using something in a new way. And what we know is hindering us to take on new perspectives. So for example, in our trainings, when we use our fake domain, we use the domain of a cinema. And then we ask people by doing example mapping to come up with a solution for the whole COVID situation. And then everyone does that, and you get some ideas and some solutions and some models. But we're all stuck in what we know about a cinema. I mean, when we think about a cinema, it has rows, it has red chairs, it has well, there are these staircases at the side of these chairs. That's how we think about a cinema, and that's what limits us in our thinking. So what we always try to do is deliberately model stuff wrong to counter this functional fixedness bias that's going on. So we just ask people to come in with the most crazy ideas that they can think of. They don't have to be realistic, but just come in with crazy ideas. So at one point, I remember in a session that someone just said, well, what we could do is we could remove all the chairs and then let everyone enter the cinema in this plastic bubble, and then we can fit more people in. And it's a crazy idea, but it really helps you to counter that functional fixedness and just model stuff wrong on purpose. It's really fun to do, and I would encourage everyone to do that more often. So that's just one bias, because, well, like I said, we could do way more, but we don't have time for that. So I want to ask you a very simple question, and it's on the next slide. So under or over? We have a lot of discussions about this. And well, basically there is no right answer, right? I mean, Kenny has his preference and I have my preference, and then some people just don't care. But what we are saying here is that we have to deal with accuracy and completeness. So do we want to be accurate or do we want to be complete? And especially in collaborative modeling sessions, we want to be complete. We want to include all the perspectives and all the insights. So for example, you could see a duck and a rabbit in this picture, but in order to see the rabbit, you really have to let go of the duck and the other way around. But you are able to see both perspectives. And this is a simple example because sometimes it gets harder. For example, the dress picture that was going viral at one point, I am only able to see gold and blue in this picture. And there are some people who are seeing black in this picture, but I am just not able to see it. So it's really hard for me to let go of my own perspective here. And I cannot be complete because I'm not seeing everything that's going on here. So we always strive to be complete in the sessions that we facilitate instead of being accurate and convincing someone of why we are right. We want to be complete in that sense. So we always want to have dialogues over discussions, and dialogues are focused on understanding, listening, asking questions, postponing judgment, and that's how you can make sure, or at least try to be as complete as possible, instead of just convincing someone I'm right, you're wrong, I'm great, you're an idiot, and that's something that's really, really important in these sessions. So Kenny, when it comes to decision making, how can we do that?
Yeah, so of course we cannot always go into a dialogue. Soon we need to make a decision together. And again, every autocratic decision creates resistance, and that's fine if everyone's okay with that. But there's a few tricks, a few ways to get everyone on board with that decision. And the first thing is really, if you want to know each other's perspective, we really should stop doing these corporate meetings, but look at this as a campfire, right? Where we all share and we talk about things. Because what's happening in these sessions is we only talk about the solutions, but never about the why. And when you look at deep democracy, they look at the iceberg, right? You have the conscious and the unconscious, and usually in the group conscious, there's only solutions, okay? But that toilet paper under and over, and everyone says, it's in the pattern, right, that it's over. Well, you know, I have a cat, and my cat scratches the toilet paper. Yeah, if it's over, it's going to make a mess. If it's under, it doesn't really make a mess. And that's really about the unconscious part that we need to discuss. And that we can only do that if we really do meetings as campfire. And that's from the great book called Corporate Tribe by Jitske and Danielle. They're anthropologists. They also introduced deep democracy. And there's another few things that you can see here. I'm not going in too deep, but there's 5 steps of sustainable decision-making. One thing is always spread the alternative view and ask for the alternative view. So if someone poses a solution, first you ask, why do you want that solution? Well, I just explained, I have a cat, this and that. And then ask who recognizes themselves in that, right? A little bit. And then someone says, yeah, I also have this and this and that. And then you're spreading that knowledge and making sure that label, that projection towards that weird person is being spread around the group. And then at some point you need to vote. So I try to do this in a democracy way. There needs to be a majority vote. And then when we have a majority vote, I always ask to the minority people, so the one who come out lowest, what does it take for you to go along? Really important, never happening. We make a decision and we move on. But what do you actually need? So if I say we need lunch of 15 minutes or 30 minutes, I want 30 and we pick 15, then I said, well, maybe later on I need to have a smaller break then in between. And everyone's fine, and then we can go along with it. And it's really interesting. And well, you can read more about deep democracy if that goes wrong, because then you get into conflict, and we call that go fishing. And the next part that's really important is going into decisions. You have 4 ways to going in. You can have an idea, which nothing is certain. You can have a clear intention, but want to have other insights. You can have a proposal, which is a worked out proposal and only serious objection can influence it. And you have a command. This is what we're going to do. What does it take for you to go along? Really important when you give the decision. Usually a manager comes in and they already have a proposal or a command, but they act like if it's nothing is certain yet. And that's just not fair. Be explicit. This is what we're going to do because blah, blah, blah. And what does it take for you to go along? Which is fine sometimes. People, this is a guilty pleasure. People love sometimes that decisions are made for them, as long as they're being heard and stuff. So be explicit how you do that. Right? So if we look at, if we want to ensure all the parts in the system are identified and allowed to speak, well, then we need to create awareness of people in their ranks in the group. We need to own, play, and share that rank. And that's really spreading out the ranking amongst each other in our teams. And we need to be aware and make explicit the biases at play, right? You have functional fixes, but there's a lot as well. And of course, if you want to really get into that real nice, deep democratic decision-making, look at deep democracy and use that ask for people to go along when a decision is made. Just doing that already helps tremendously, right? To start with. Ask, what do you need to go along? And that's it. And I hopefully we have some time for questions.
You're forgetting the most important advice.
Yeah. And leave the judging to the cats, right? Thank you very much. So I'm checking the chat or the Q&A, but I don't see any questions yet.
I did saw some very interesting ranking examples, which was very something about proposals at tech conferences. I can relate to that, but that's that's also a very interesting one.
Yeah, so talk about it. A nice way about that ranking is what we do is a ranking bingo in the team, which is you can find it up from Arnold Mindell. And you just rank yourself in a line in the team together and make it explicit what's the ranking in this group. And then you let the person on the outer sides talk to each other. And those are really interesting discussions. I saw a few examples there, right, going into that, Evelyn. And we did it as well. So about marketing or about what you just earlier said on. Yeah, I always get to ditch these administrative thing. And I've been to companies where they call the office support the ladies from office support. So please stop doing that, because that's labeling that office supports are only women. They're not. We need to spread these roles, and we need to have the expertise. I see a Q&A popping up. So I'll just...
Do you?
Yeah. So how does deep democracy compare, contrast, complement to consent decision-making in S3? Well, do you know consent decision-making in S3?
Nope.
No? Well, we can explore that later.
Yeah.
I see there's...
This is scary.
The organizers are back.
No, but it's okay.
Again.
So thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Evelyn, for our keynote. Unfortunately, I can't hear them, which means it's super awkward. I'm going to say thank you anyway. If there's any additional questions, please head up to floor number 10. We're going to ask the speakers to be there as well. You'll see them. It's probably an empty floor, so it's pretty easy to spot them. So if you have any questions, head over to floor number 10. It's on the left side of your screen. For now, it's time for sponsor pitches. I'm happy that I actually have a physical sponsor next to me. This is what a sponsor looks like.